Cash Flow Diary Podcast, episode 484.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cash Flow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cash Flow Diary Podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cash Flow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because here's the thing. When it comes down to building your business, I know it can feel like it's this long grind that's never going to end. When am I going to get there? Well, what's interesting about that is that, well, all of us as entrepreneurs feel that at various different levels and ways, and it's all really kind of relative. For example, if you're just working on a small little lemonade stand, growing that to something of significance, well, that's relative. What is significant to you? But here's something that I have found to be very true, is that it's not just so much about top line numbers as much as it can be about bottom line numbers. And I think today's guest has managed to do some things that are very, very unique, specifically in the real estate brokerage space. So let me ask you this. If you went from zero to earning $1 million after expenses in 3 years, would you finally go, oh my goodness, I figured something out? Well, today's guest has done exactly that. In fact, he's written a book about it called The $1 Million Real Estate Team. And I am, of course, talking about Chris Waters. Now, if you are out there in the Austin area, you probably already know him. But what's more important is that he's here today to share with you and I, what is it going to take for us to build, and not just build, but also scale? Because being able to do that in a short period of time is something we all want or maybe even fantasize about. But now we get to dig in and find out how he did it. So let's get ready to listen. Let's get ready to learn from Chris Waters. Chris, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
I'm glad that you were able to make the time. Now, this being your first time here, I have to ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody the first time that they're here. You ready?
Go for it.
All right. I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. So, Batman, Robin, Superman, Wonder Woman, etc. Superheroes. Because I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. Chief among them is the fact that, for example, as time I can, as an entrepreneur, I can imagine myself, flying around town, using our products and services to save our customers. It can feel like that occasionally, but also like a superhero, an entrepreneur has a beginning. If you think about, say, Spider-Man, there was a time where he was just a kid going to school, doing his thing, taking some photos, and then one day he gets bit by a spider, discovers I have a special ability. And now I have to make a choice to use it for good or for evil. So my question to you is as follows. Before Waters International Realty, before your book, before Texas State University, before everything we know you for today, what we want to know is, who is Chris Waters?
Yeah. If I had to think of myself as a superhero, the person that comes to mind is the Hulk. And
okay, that's cool.
The guy, the Hulk, before he transforms, right? He's kind of this, he's not very flashy, not like super extroverted, but not completely introverted, more of an ambivert. Can communicate, likes to research and learn. Man, that is me to a T. Like growing up, I was just, fascinated with learning how to do new things and kind of the science of business and try to maintain my humility through success, and just kind of embrace the process of learning something new. And that is probably the best superhero analogy I can give you for how to describe,
That's fine.
describe myself.
You don't have to confine yourself just to the superhero analogies, although it does make sense, and I get it. So was real estate something that was like in your blood from the beginning?
No, definitely not. In college, I had a lawn mowing business to pay my way through school. And, obviously there's a very low barrier to entry to do that. Any kid can pick up a mower and do it. So I mean, that's how I, was paying my way through school. When I was younger, probably when I was probably 12, 13, 14, I was, fascinated by the stock market. I took like stock market classes and stuff like that in the summer. And then, in my probably like middle school, high school years, in the evening hours, I was learning how to build websites and learning HTML and JavaScript. And, that's kind of what I was doing in the evening hours. Wasn't a big partier or anything like that, growing up. And yeah, so, that's kind of what I was like in the earlier years.
Interesting. But that has literally nothing to do with real estate. So this begs the question, how do we get there? How do we go from lawn mowing, which, by the way, is pretty awesome. I have too many allergies to do that one, but I like it. And it's like, whatever it takes, we're going to get this thing done. But these things between lawn mowing, stock classes, and JavaScript HTML, they not only are those not related, they're not related to real estate at all. So there's a journey here. So take us on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, when I when my freshman year of college, I moved to upstate New York, and I'm from Austin, Texas. And my dad's brother bought a franchise, and I moved to upstate New York to help him for the summer. And I got to begin to help him kind of just with the elementary building blocks of starting a business, and helping him implement, the systems, methodologies, and processes, that a typical franchise system gives to a franchisee. And so, I learned a tremendous amount. When you think about the various departments of a business, you've got the marketing and lead generation, kind of the back office, accounting, financial type stuff. You've got, the sales side of, developing leads, converting leads, et cetera. And so my freshman year of college, being in upstate New York, helping my uncle, I actually ended up staying there through the whole year. I only intended on going up there for the summer, but I was just fascinated by the different aspects of business, and it was very much an eye-opening experience for me. And what really drove me, what drove me and kind of opened up my eyes was, how being an entrepreneur, you get to work on a lot of different aspects of the business, and no day is the same. And, every day is a challenge. And, I think the variety from a day-to-day basis is really what, got me excited about the idea of being self-employed and building a business. So that really kind of like, that lit the entrepreneurial spirit in me to an entirely new level my freshman year of college. I mean, I had done some things growing up. Like I had a small lawn mowing business that I started in the 5th grade, and was doing like 20 houses a day in the summer. I mean, it was pretty crazy, actually.
Wow.
How many houses I was doing. I had another guy helping me, but I've always had like a pretty intense work ethic, and but that year in New York, just helping start a franchise, and getting to learn about all the different aspects of business really took the entrepreneurial fire to an entirely new level. And I had to find a way to pay for college to move back to Austin. And I didn't really enjoy living in upstate New York. The business side was awesome, but upstate New York, it's freezing cold there. I mean, I think they got 120 inches of snow the year I was there. And I'm, in Austin, I mean, if we get, I don't know, half an inch of snow every couple of years, it's an amazing thing.
Stormwatch 2018. You're right, totally.
Highways shut down, the school shut down. Yeah, so I had to find a way to move back to Austin to be able to pay for school. So the only thing I knew was when I was a kid doing the lawn mowing business, and I didn't have a lot of money, so I had enough money to buy a truck, equipment, etc. And I used a lot of the things I learned from this franchise system to build up, a pretty decent lawn business. I brought in like $250,000 in sales,
Wow.
my lawn business, which I felt pretty good about. And so my senior year of college, I had this customer, and he had a real estate team underneath Keller Williams, and he recruited me when I graduated from college to go work for him. And I was there for probably 4 or 5 months, and I quit. I sold like half a dozen houses, and I quit because I was just I felt like there was this proverbial ceiling, if you will, being on his team. And I'm just the type of person that values freedom immensely, and I want to be put in a position where there's no ceiling, right? Most sales and commission based people, they want to be in a position where there's just massive upside, and they don't even want to know what the ceiling is. So anyways, I got out of real estate after 4 months, and I was in the oil and gas business, and I maintained my real estate license, but I got into the oil and gas business. It was super hot in 2007, and I was miserable. It was the most miserable job I've ever had. Doing oil and gas. I was what's called a landman. My job was to track down the owners of mineral rights and get them to sign an oil and gas lease so they could drill for oil or gas. And anyways, I did that. I made a ton of money doing it, and I saved all my money. I lived super cheap. And in 2009, I got to a point where I was just so unhappy. I was like, I can't keep doing this anymore. And then one other thing that happened was the Dow Jones, dropped to like 5,000 or something crazy in 2009. And so the price of natural gas plummeted, and the company we got contracted out by, they let go of like 1,000 people overnight. And so what's kind of interesting is like that whole time I was doing oil and gas, I was fascinated by learning about marketing and search engine optimization, copywriting, all these different various things to focus on lead generation. And so I'd saved a bunch of money in 2009. I took all that money and I opened up a bar and restaurant. Why I didn't go into real estate, into real estate, I don't know. I did some research that said when the market crashes, typically alcohol sales go up. And so I invested in a bar and restaurant. It was a complete disaster. I lost everything. Ended up sleeping on my girlfriend's couch, who's now my wife. So that was probably the most amazing thing that came out of that. But after the bar and restaurant failed, like I just couldn't find myself going to work for somebody again because I was just so miserable in this job out of college. And the thing that, again, low barrier to entry, real estate, being a licensed real estate agent, the barrier to entry is super low. So, I took a lot of the things I had learned in 2008 and 9 around marketing and lead generation, started applying that, and, was just like, I loved it. I loved every minute of getting to manage all these different components of building out a business. And, the market was horrendous in 2010, and that created an incredible opportunity in the real estate industry because as a realtor, you can open up the MLS and you can see all of the homes that are failing to sell every day. And so what I started doing was I started cold calling all of these expired and withdrawn listings almost daily, prospecting to try to, get the seller to hire me to sell their home. And so I started having a tremendous amount of success doing that, and it started generating a ton of leads, people calling on the for sale signs, inquiring online. And so I just started hiring salespeople to help me manage all the leads. And so really that was the beginning of building a really big business in about 3 short years from 2010. We grew to just shy of 100 million in sales in a single year and had a very small sales team that pulled that off, and netted $1 million over those 3 years. And then the following year netted $1 million in a single year. And that's been kind of my long-winded answer to your question on the journey and how I got there.
No, I like it. I don't know if you've noticed this, but you have this habit of studying things that really are not that are like not even like here's what I'm saying. You were working in oil and gas, but for whatever reason you were studying marketing and lead generation. And I'm like, why would those two, it didn't seem like, why was he doing that? Which I find interesting. And then it's like something catches your attention while you're in the midst of doing something else, but that thing that's got your attention ends up becoming the thing that helps you at the whatever the next thing is. And I just find this very, very, at least that's what I see based upon the story you just sharing. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty interesting. But I love the fact that at the point you go where the bar and restaurant fails, you're like, you expressed what I like to call, you are now psychologically unemployable. You're like, I can't see myself working for anyone else ever again. So now I've got to do something about it. And you did, and you fortunately had the skill sets, which I think is a lesson to a lot of people who are listening right now, to always be working on a next skill set, because you don't know when you might need it, which leads me back to asking, have you ever used the HTML or JavaScript at all? I'm just curious.
Man, I've had some like random, it's kind of interesting. I can if you right click on your computer over a website and you hit view source, you can see the JavaScript and HTML. So like I can actually read all that, which is pretty crazy. But I don't know, man, the amount I probably have written a few like taglines or HTML to like tweak a landing page or something back in the day, but I haven't done it in a while, but it came in handy a little bit.
Yeah. I'm just curious. So that's good. Now, what's interesting to me is you went from, you said Keller Williams over to oil and gas, then to a bar and restaurant.
I've never thought about how crazy it is, like how my choices were so off the wall. Oh man.
Yeah. Welcome. This is what I do. Is like I'm trying to put the pieces together, and I'm just like so, normally this is you're a unique case right now, and I'm trying to figure it out. Hello there, entrepreneur. This is Jay Massey, and what I want to say to you is that the number one mistake that I have ever made in business, number one, has been waiting too long to do the books, waiting too long to get the bookkeepers, the accountants, the CPAs, the CFOs involved, and I don't want you to make that same mistake. That mistake cost me over 6 figures, and now for a significant discount, you have the ability to get your books together using FreshBooks. So what I want you to do is I want you to go over to gofreshbooks.com/cashflow diary. Again, that's gofreshbooks.com/cashflow diary. FreshBooks is the easy to use software designed to help you, the small business owner, the freelancer, get organized and save time on invoicing, getting paid faster, keeping those books in order so that it becomes a bonus for you to do your taxes as opposed to a burden. Go over to gofreshbooks.com/cashflow diary and get started today. And now let's get back to the rest of the story.
So like, I guess to fill in a few gaps. So between being at Keller Williams and getting into oil and gas, when I was at this team at Keller Williams, I had a client that I sold a house to that said, "Hey, you need to meet this guy. He works for, he owns his own real estate brokerage called Texas Ranch and Home Realty." So I met this guy named Dial, an unbelievable guy, super awesome guy. And Dial said, "Chris, you're 21 years old. Right now, like the oil and gas industry is like going bananas. If you really want to, learn more about the technical back end part of real estate in your career before you, blow it up, if you will, the oil and gas industry being a landman is kind of interesting because you get to research title and, basically, I don't know, depending on what state you're in, whenever you sell a house or you buy a house, you go through a title company or an escrow company, and their job is to build like a family tree about kind of the historical records of the property. So as a landman, your job is you have to go through and build this family tree of a property to identify who owns the mineral rights. And so it gave me, he told me, he kind of challenged me. He said, hey, this is going to be an interesting thing for you to learn because it's another facet of real estate brokerage that most agents and brokers don't learn. And he said, and the market's super hot. So 2007, like real estate market was kind of weak. This broker that I went to go work for, he, said, I'll connect you with this company called Chesapeake. It's a huge natural gas company. And you can probably get a job through them and learn an interesting aspect of real estate from the title perspective. And so he's kind of who introduced me to it. And then the whole time I was doing that, I just was super unhappy about the actual job itself of researching title and building these things called abstracts. And so
Yep.
that's why I spent the evening hours learning about marketing, lead generation, SEO, and all these types of things. And then, when the oil and gas market crashed in 2009, I was like, oh, perfect opportunity to go into something else because I'm miserable. And a guy that I knew that was a loan officer, a mortgage loan officer, he helped people get home loans. He came from a family that had like a bar and restaurant empire. And this was a guy I had met years prior when I was a real estate agent at Keller Williams. And he said, hey, we should open a bar and restaurant together here in Austin on 6th Street. And so I was like, so I did some research and, historically alcohol sales went up. So I was like, okay, maybe that's a good thing to invest in. I wasn't planning on getting it, wrapped up in being, involved in the business beyond from an investor perspective, but I ended up getting wrapped up into it. I actually originally wanted to go back into real estate brokerage and, being an agent in 2009, but got into the bar and restaurant thing. And so anyways, that's kind of, hopefully that filled a few of the gaps.
It did. But, and it also generates another question because a lot of people will, if, getting into real estate, they'll go become an agent, get their license, Keller Williams, very reputable, etc. You said, no, I want to build my own brokerage. That's an interesting decision.
Yeah. So, man, ignorance, I tell you what, man, I mean, all these events you're hearing about, I was 21, 22, 23, 24 years old, right? Like 2006, I was 21, 22. I go into real estate for 4 months. I was still 21. Going to oil and gas, I'm like 22, 23 years old. So like, I'm just, ignorant, pretty much. I mean, in 2010, I was 26, and like I had kept my real estate license active. And so don't ask me how, but for whatever reason, I was able to get my brokerage license, my real estate broker's license.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you have your broker's license, you can actually sponsor and take on other agents. And what's, more mind blowing about that is I hadn't even sold that many houses, and I hadn't been active as an agent for like 4 years. I just happened to keep my license active. And so, I guess, man, it's just ignorance is bliss. Like summer of 2010, I was like, yeah, I'll start a real estate brokerage. Why not? And went and got my license and started, building up business like any normal agent would. And, and I started generating way too many leads for me to handle by myself. And so it kind of out of necessity started growing it, from a recruiting perspective to bring on salespeople to work those leads. So,
What I can hear? I hear in the background someone being upset with you right now. They're like, what do you mean you generated too many leads that you can handle? That's not fair.
yeah.
So, which suggests to me, because I find this to be a very common thing amongst either real estate investors, real estate agents, is they're not all good at marketing, but yet you've managed to figure something out. Share with us. What's up?
Yeah, so I mean that's probably the thing I'm most fascinated with is the marketing and lead generation aspect. I mean, that's what I was doing in the evening hours when I was 22, 23, 24, doing as a landman, was learning how to generate leads and SEO. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's about utilizing. I mean, in the B2C world, that's very important to differentiate between B2C and B2B. In the B2C world, where you're going after consumers, I don't know. In my mind, just generating leads is easy. Like you run campaigns on Google AdWords, you set up retargeting ads, you create content like through a blog, and try to capture certain long-tailed keywords to drive traffic to your website and have them, fill out forms so you can capture them and call them. I mean, that's the most, simplistic way to generate leads. I realized in 2007 and 8, like scaling the SEO is very long. It's a very long process, and it takes a really long time to generate massive numbers of leads through SEO. And so the better strategy is using Google AdWords, and obviously now you can use Facebook to generate leads. So, between Google and Facebook, man, I think most anybody can generate more leads than they can ever handle. I've since then, learned other lead generation things like using direct mail, radio, TV, billboards. Over the course of the last 8 years, I've personally spent over $5 million split testing various lead generation strategies. And so in the beginning days when I didn't have any money and I was sleeping on my girlfriend's couch, the only thing I could afford was SEO and writing content to try to get organic leads. And then also I was posting properties for sale on Craigslist because that was free back then. Now there's what's called the Facebook Marketplace, where you can post properties for sale and you can generate leads through the Facebook Marketplace. So, it's about just leveraging, the low-hanging fruit. The other thing I leveraged from a lead gen perspective back in 2010 when I didn't have any money was going after expired and withdrawn listings, houses that had failed to sell. It didn't cost anything to generate those leads and to call those people up. So depending on what stage you are in the growth of your business, really dictates, what lead gen strategies you should be using. I mean, if you're a small business and you have a limited amount of money, then, you've got to go after the cheaper lead sources. The interesting thing I have found, though, is as you start utilizing some of these more lead generation tactics, like maybe it's radio, TV, billboards, direct mail, those are very expensive leads to generate, and it takes a long time to, build the brand awareness and brand equity to be able to start generating leads. But those type of leads have crazy high conversion rates. So in the beginning stages of building a business, you got to grind for a while when you're going after those cheap leads because the conversion rates are terrible. But as your business grows and you hone in your sales skills and you get better salespeople, you can start, bringing in better types of lead sources that cost more, but will also have higher conversion rates, and start building some amazing brand equity in the community as you start to leverage them.
What's interesting about everything you just shared there is that you just burst somebody's bubble, because they were like, man, I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to have this going to work overnight.
Yeah.
And you're like, everything you're saying is like, yep, there's more work involved. But it can be done, but there's more work involved, which I absolutely appreciate. So talk to me for a moment and answer me this. Why write the book? What was behind that? Why tell us about your $1 million real estate team? What's the impetus?
So, I was 21 and I got into real estate, and I was super driven, super hungry. And I felt like, what got me out of the real estate industry after only like 4 months was the lack of career trajectory. Like, I just didn't understand how I was going to just have, upward trajectory and have limitless upward trajectory in the real estate space. And so because I didn't see that, I got out of the industry. And then what I realized after getting out was, actually there is a career path to, unlimited income trajectory in the real estate space. And it was really important. So like when I started building the business, what really drove me when I started recruiting salespeople was I wanted to show people a way to where you have this very clear career trajectory path. When you think about like corporate America, people, talk about the corporate ladder or whatever. And yes, the idea of like climbing the corporate ladder in your mind sounds daunting and sucks. But on the opposite end, it also creates some clear, career trajectory. And when you're building a small to medium business from the ground up, like as a business owner, you don't have a lot of trajectory for yourself as a business owner or for the people you're bringing on to hire. I think the only reason you lose talented people is because they don't see any more upward trajectory. Tony Robbins says happiness is derived from progress. And so when you find amazing people, you've got to have a really clear upward trajectory for them. And so I wrote the book because there wasn't anything like this that existed for people that, wanted to understand how do you go from like being a single agent realtor to scaling and building a really big business. And so the book's just really full of, not only the ups, but also a lot of downs, a lot of things we did that failed and didn't work from a lead generation perspective, from, building up salespeople and training salespeople to, just managing like back office stuff like accounting, client management. We've got a whole section on technology. And I think what I found is, and this applies to pretty much anybody in the SMB space, small and medium business space, is there's 3 very distinct phases of growth you go through when you're bootstrapping a small to medium-sized business. There's 3 very distinct phases of growth you go through, and every single business has what I call these 7 key pillars that they have to focus on if they're in the service business. And when you go through these 3 various stages of growth, there's different levers you have to push for each of those key pillars within your business. And those pillars are another way for saying like department, for example. Like one of the key departments in any business is your marketing and lead generation. Another key pillar is technology. Another one's the sales team. Another one's like coaching and training the people you hire. Another one's the back office. The other one is, the leadership and scaling aspect. Like how do you figure out the HR component of like managing people and creating the upward trajectory? The foundational DNA of your business, like the mission, the vision, the core values, these things you think that are just check boxes on a piece of paper because somebody told you in business school it's something you're supposed to do. Then you really start understanding like the vision, mission, core values is really what inspires people to want to come and join your organization and buy into a shared purpose and work on something bigger than themselves. So then you realize the importance of these things. So the book is really breaks down the 3 stages of growth everybody goes through if they're bootstrapping a small business. And it talks about how you have to hit these different levers and what specifically you have to do to get to that next stage of growth. So I think it, obviously it's going to resonate with somebody that's built in the residential real estate space. But it also, there's a lot of parallels between the book and the entire SMB space for anybody that's trying to bootstrap a business.
Now, what's interesting is that even though your business is in the real estate brokerage area, everything you just said, I believe, applies to any particular vertical of business.
Yep, I agree 100%.
It just seems that your genius came alive in this particular industry. Now, one of the things that you mentioned, and so therefore I must know, you said that the book contains things that did not work, failure events. Why was it important to you to include those?
So from a lead generation perspective, one of the biggest failures was not understanding cash conversion cycles. So every single lead generation strategy has a cash conversion cycle. So what I mean by that is I mentioned earlier about some of the more expensive lead generation strategies like radio, TV, and billboards.
Yep.
The thing is, people may call that stuff old school and say like, oh, that's crazy, everything's online. But the truth is, depending on what you're selling, radio, TV, billboard, newspaper, print may actually be very effective depending on the demographic you're going after. The difference is you have to hammer those lead generation channels for a really long period of time to build brand equity and to be able to hit the consumer with enough brand impressions for them to call you. And so you have to basically, just completely lay out a ton of cash for those lead gen channels on average for 6 months minimum before you start to see any dollars come in.
Yep.
And so you have to commit to that timeline, and you have to understand from an expectations perspective, you shouldn't expect any money to come back to you. That you should expect to light a match to $50,000 for maybe a radio TV campaign for 6 months before dollars start coming back to you. And then the other thing is you need to remember that it should not be something you stop. You should continue hammering the radio, TV, billboard, direct mail, newspaper, whatever it is, and not stop. Like marketing is not something you just do like in jolts. If you can create a lead generation funnel such that, for example, it costs you $10 to close a deal that brings in $100 in revenue, why would you ever stop? Marketing, if you can dial in the client acquisition costs, marketing should not have a limit in terms of like a budget. I mean, if your client acquisition cost is you trading a dime for a dollar,
Yep.
like you should do that all day long, and that's what's going to really help you, build your business big, is dialing in the client acquisition cost and understanding cash conversion cycles with these different lead generation strategies. So in the book, I talked about how I implemented a direct mail campaign. I spent $250,000 on this direct mail campaign, and I hammered these specific geographic territories in Austin for 6 months. And I didn't actually start seeing that money come back to me until I started getting clients like in months 5 and 6. And then I didn't actually start closing any deals and seeing the money, really hit my bank account until like months 8 or 9. And so I quit doing the direct mail in month 6. And, I went after I failed and lost a crap ton of money. I started like reaching out to other people across the U.S. that had a lot of success. And they all told me, hey, the cash conversion cycle with direct mail is 12 months. So you better be ready to pour out a ton of cash before that's going to start coming back to you. And then in year 2 is when direct mail can get really, really good because you've built a tremendous amount of brand equity with a very specific, audience. So, I mean, that's why it was important to me is I wanted people to understand, like have context of, why they should do, why they should go down this path and not this other path.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. By the way, I still have this mental image in my head of taking $50,000 and like literally setting it on fire. But that's basically, you've just got to be willing to let it sit out there for a long time. So talk to me about this. For someone who's just getting started though, let's pretend that they don't have those, they may not have those resources. And in today's market, between the social media and all the other channels and choices that someone has, what would you go with? Like if you had to go, all right, I'm starting today, but you know everything you know right now, but you're starting today. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do to generate leads?
And you have the context of not having any money, right?
Yes.
So the first thing I would go do is that's a great question, by the way. The first thing I would go do is build a local mastermind of local business owners. So I would go find people, in like 20 to 25 different industries. Mm-hmm. And I would build a local mastermind of people in the SMB space. Like, for example, in real estate, home services type companies, roofers, foundation companies, siding companies, windows, mortgage company, title company, homeowners insurance, life insurance, financial advisors, bookkeepers, other, retail, local type businesses. I would build a group of people in a mastermind. And I don't know if any of you guys have read Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. Mm-hmm. Amazing book. I think you should read that every single year. So I'd build a group. I'd build a mastermind group. And then what I would do is I would, it would be kind of like a high level BNI group, right? Where each other's helping generate referrals, but also here's the kicker. So this is what helped me fund lead generation back in 2010 when I was sleeping on my girlfriend's couch. So what I basically told the people in this my mastermind group only started with like 3 or 4 people, but it grew from there to being now, we get over $60,000 a month from people in our mastermind groups. And so in the beginning, I didn't charge anything, but as time progressed, probably as time progressed, as like 3 to 6 months later, circa 2010, I started telling these local businesses like, hey, I'll tell you what, like I'll put you on my website. I'll put you in my buyer guides, my seller guides. I'll advertise you as my preferred vendor in this very specific category. And I would ask for you to contribute a very small amount of money for being my preferred vendor. So like, the homeowner's insurance guy, I said, hey, can you kick in $250 a month? My mortgage guy, I was like, hey, can you kick in 1,000 a month? The roofer guy, I said, hey, can you kick in 500? The plumber, can you kick in, 250 a month? So I started raising money for my lead generation efforts by leveraging the mastermind group. And then I used those guys, I marketed those guys through all of the different places where I was advertising to customers, and that was like the buyer guide, seller guides, website, etc. I would do blog articles with video where I would interview the business owner, and I would, ask them, to tell me how you got started, what separates you, why should someone call you, and just did a quick little 2-minute video, and I'd send that out to my own personal customer database. And so I did all these very tactical things for each of the guys in the mastermind group, and they contributed money financially so that it could help, I could use that money to put in a kitty to, spend on lead generation to grow faster.
Like it a lot. He's like, here's my hack for you, the system right now. That just means that nobody has an excuse, which is great. Now, for those that have listened this far and want to pick up more of these ideas and hear more about the story or find out more about what you got going on, what's going to be the best way for them to catch up with you?
So if you guys pick up a copy of my book, you can actually, if you order it online through wirbook.com, I can get you a signed copy. It's also available on Amazon, and it's called The $1 Million Real Estate Team. And I've got my information in the book, believe it or not. We've sold a couple thousand copies. We have a private Facebook group of people in the real estate space. It's kind of like a high-level mastermind. So if you order the book through wirbook.com, you'll get not only a signed copy, but you also get an invitation to our private Facebook group. And then my personal contact details are in the last page of the book, both my phone number and email. So I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. People can reach out to me on there too.
Excellent. Now, as we wind down here, I've got a final question for you because I'm curious to hear what your answer is going to be, given the myriad of different things that you have done. Let's pretend for a moment that someone listening is, they're standing at what I like to call that precipice of decision, where they're going, you know what, I'm going to finally do this thing. I'm going to jump in, both feet. I'm going to be that entrepreneur. I can make it. If he can go through all of those crazy things, lose everything in a restaurant, I can do this too. And like I know, Chris, that what happens is when we get to those moments of decision, we're often met with a companion, and that companion comes in the form of a voice, and that voice often reminds us of, what didn't work last time, how it's not going to work, and who are you to think you're going to do what? You're going to sell how much? No one's going to work with you. And for some people, they're even related to that voice. So my question to you is as follows. Let's pretend that this time it's going to be different, and they're going to follow through. In fact, they're going to follow through in the next 24 to 48 hours. So what would you suggest that they do?
So I read a book back in 2010, and I was struggling like massively. Like, I was learning something. I was learning a new skill set, and I was struggling immensely. And I was at the beginning of climbing what most of us would call Mount Everest of trying to build a successful business. And so I read a book Tony Robbins wrote called Awaken the Giant Within.
Yes. Sorry, you're the first person. That is one of. Sorry. Go ahead. Yes.
Man, it was an unbelievable book at that time in starting something new, because in the book he references like how you have to kind of just embrace the journey of the suck in the beginning when you're not good at something, and you have to kind of zoom out for a moment and realize that this is just one tiny moment in time of your next 20 to 30 years of, mastering this new business. And so if you can, keep a sense of perspective as you're going through the journey of starting something new, it keeps you from beating yourself up when things are really hard. So I would highly encourage you to pick up a copy of that book, because it'll help you as you begin this new journey.
Well, I think I showed all my cards already, so I'm familiar with the book. It definitely was one of my first books too for very similar reasons, which I think is amazing. I'm like, yes, I mean, I have asked that question in book recommendations many times of hundreds and probably thousands of people now. And that was the first time someone said a book that I'm like, yeah, that's the same book. I feel the same way about that very book. And it was in that order for me too. So that's amazing. Totally appreciate that. I also appreciate the hustle. I appreciate the fact that you're like, you know what? No matter what I'm doing, I'm going to be always constant and never ending improvement in some way, shape, or form. And that's what you've been about. And it shows, in the things that you guys have been able to accomplish. And I definitely appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge, your wisdom, as well as your insight here with us today at the Cashflow Diary.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. This has been great. You've asked some unbelievable questions and definitely made me think twice about how the heck I found this path from 2006 to now. And it's been kind of a self-awareness exercise, to say the least.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? WIRbook.com. Why? Because you know you need more leads. How would you like to have more leads than you have time? That's what he said. Oh my goodness. When is the right time for your business to experience that phenomenon? I say it's right now. So move at the speed of instruction, make it happen, follow through, do it, because on the other end of that struggle, on the other end of that challenge is the greatest version of yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.